All right, let's jump right in. We're going to be unpacking the new Sustainability Assurance Standard, ISSA 5000, and really zeroing in on what it means for our actual day-to-day work. We'll be looking at how we respond to risks in this new world, and maybe most importantly, how we get our hands on the kind of rock-solid evidence we need to back up our conclusions. And here it is, the International Standard on Sustainability Assurance 5000. You really should think of this less as just another piece of guidance and more as the new rulebook for all of us. This sets the foundation for every sustainability assurance engagement from here on out, so getting a firm grasp on its evidence requirements is, well, it's not really optional, is it? It's absolutely essential. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start by exploring this new evidence landscape. Then we'll dive into how to evaluate information before you can even call it evidence. From there, we'll connect the dots from risk to procedure, open up our toolkit of tests, wrestle with the tricky world of estimates, and then we'll wrap it all up with the kind of mindset we need to make all of this work. Look, for most of us, responding to risk and gathering evidence, that feels like second nature, right? But the thing is, when you take those exact same concepts and apply them to sustainability information, you're suddenly on a whole new frontier. All of a sudden, we're dealing with new kinds of data, a much heavier reliance on estimates, and a value chain that's just wider. The core principles we know and love haven't changed, but how we apply them, yeah, that's become way more complex. And that brings us right to our bedrock principle. Paragraph 39 lays it out in no uncertain terms. Professional skepticism isn't just a nice to have, it's a shall. When you're looking at forward-looking statements or grappling with complex scientific data or trying to make sense of qualitative disclosures, having a questioning mind and critically assessing the evidence is more important than it has ever been. So before we can even think about gathering evidence, we really need to get on the same page about what good evidence even looks like in this new context. The good news is ISS 5000 gives us a really clear framework for this. Okay, so paragraph 90 gives us the two pillars of quality evidence, relevance and reliability. And the critical thing to remember here is that you have to evaluate both. It's not an either-or. You could have perfectly reliable data, let's say a super precise government statistic, but if it doesn't actually connect to the assertion you're testing, it's useless, it's irrelevant. On the flip side, a highly relevant claim for management that you can't trace back to a reliable data source, well, that's just noise. Now this is our bread and butter, isn't it? When we're using information that the client themselves generated, paragraph 91 tells us we have to dig in. We can't just take their pretty internal report at face value. We have to go get evidence about its accuracy and its completeness. You know the drill. Is the underlying data sound? Are there gaps? And is it granular enough for what we need to do? A high-level dashboard might look great for the board, but it might not be nearly precise enough for our testing. We're going to be seeing a lot of work from management's experts in this space. I'm talking environmental scientists, human rights specialists, you name it. And paragraph 92 gives us this crucial four-step process we have to follow. First, you vet the expert. Are they competent? Are they objective? Then, you have to understand their methodology. What did they actually do? After that, you look at how the company used those findings in their report. And only after you've done all that can you finally make a judgment call on whether their work is solid enough to be used as evidence. Okay, so now we know what good evidence looks like. Let's talk about how we actually go out and get it. This is where we bridge the gap. We connect our risk assessment, the why we're concerned about something, to the specific procedures we're going to design, which is the how we're going to address that risk. This flow should feel pretty familiar to all of us. We identify and assess the risks. We design procedures to hit those risks head on. We perform them to get persuasive evidence, and then we step back and evaluate everything we found. This cycle, this process, it's the engine of any assurance engagement, and it's right at the heart of ISF 5000. Now, this slide here really gets to a critical difference between limited and reasonable assurance. For limited assurance, we're focused on risks at the high-level disclosure level. But for reasonable assurance, paragraph 126R says, nope, you gotta go deeper. We have to design procedures that address risks at the individual assertion level, completeness, accuracy, occurrence, for every single material disclosure. I mean, that is a huge leap in the depth and the detail of our work. And here it is. The golden rule that really dictates how much work we do. Paragraph 127C says it plain as day. The higher the risk, the more persuasive your evidence has to be. And this isn't just about getting more evidence. It's about the quality of that evidence. For a really high-risk area, one piece of uncorroborated information just isn't going to cut it. We need a much stronger, more robust body of evidence. So how do we actually gather that persuasive evidence? Well, our toolkit basically has two main approaches. We can test the effectiveness of internal controls, or we can perform substantive procedures. The standard gives us a pretty clear definition here. Substantive procedures are our direct test for material misstatements. They are our number one way of getting comfortable with the numbers and narratives in that sustainability report, and they really break down into two main flavors.
Yeah, and it's really important to get the distinction. Analytical procedures are about the big picture. We're analyzing trends, looking for relationships. Does energy consumption go up when production volume goes up? Makes sense. Test the details, on the other hand, that's where we get into the weeds. This is tracing emission factors back to the source document. It's reviewing contracts to make sure reporting boundaries are right, or even just reperforming the calculations ourselves to see if we get the same answer.
All right, let's talk about one of the toughest areas in sustainability assurance: auditing estimates and all that forward-looking information. We're talking about things like GHG reduction targets or the financial impacts of climate risk. All these projections, they are inherently uncertain, they're subjective, and man, do they carry a high risk of misstatement. Just look at the jump in requirements here between limited and reasonable assurance. Under limited, our work is mostly about evaluating management's process. Did they use the right criteria? Is their method reasonable? But under reasonable assurance, paragraph 146R demands we go so much further. We can't just evaluate the process, we have to actively get in there and test how the estimate was actually developed. And this slide tells you exactly what testing means. For reasonable assurance, we are required to do at least one of these pretty demanding procedures. We can directly test their process and their data. We could test the controls they have over that process. Or, and this is a big one, we can develop our own independent estimate to use as a comparison. Make no mistake about it, this is an incredibly high bar that requires some serious expertise and professional judgment. So, as we start to wrap this up, let's bring it all back to the core principles. These new standards, this complex data, it requires more than just learning new procedures. It requires us to double down on the foundational mindset of our entire profession. Paragraphs 39 and 40 are a great reminder that our two most powerful tools are, and always will be, professional skepticism and professional judgment. Skepticism is what forces us to challenge assumptions and look for what might be missing. And judgment is what allows us to navigate all this ambiguity, to assess the risks, and to design procedures that are truly effective in this new, complex world. This quote from the appendix just nails the reality of this work. We are not looking for a clean bank reconciliation here. A lot of the evidence we're going to find is going to be persuasive, not conclusive. Our goal isn't to find a single smoking gun. It's about building a compelling case by gathering a body of relevant, reliable evidence that, when you look at it all together, gives you a solid basis for your conclusion. And that brings us to the final, and I think most critical question. In a world of estimates and projections, just going through the motions of a checklist is not going to be enough. The real challenge for all of us is this: how are you going to redesign your procedures to move beyond just sufficient and gather evidence that is truly persuasive? Answering that question, well, that's the key to mastering SA 5000.